I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the construction crew drilling rebar straight into my land 6 inches over the line. To be exact, 6 inches that didn't belong to them, but belonged to me. And who was standing there, arms crossed, sunglasses on, acting like she owned half the county? Karen, self-appointed HOA president of a neighborhood that wasn't even supposed to have an HOA. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it, she didn't apologize. She just smirked and said, "Relax. It's only 6 inches. No one cares." Oh, but I cared. And she had no idea that those 6 little inches were about to become the most expensive mistake of her life, one that would tear apart her fake HOA kingdom, drain her bank accounts, and cost her far more than the house she illegally built. Before we get into this unbelievable story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there, and hey, if you enjoy HOA drama, don't forget to subscribe for more chaotic tales like this. When people talk about peace and quiet, they usually mean a weekend getaway or a couple hours without traffic noise. For me, peace and quiet wasn't a luxury, it was my life. My land sat on a long, narrow 5-acre strip tucked between thick trees and a small creek, the kind of place where you could step outside at sunrise and hear nothing but birds and running water. My father bought that land back in 1985, when prices were laughably cheap, and he spent every spare weekend teaching me how to clear brush, maintain boundary markers, and respect what you own. That land wasn't fancy. It wasn't a mansion, it wasn't some influencer paradise, but it was mine, completely paid off. No mortgage, no HOA telling me what color my porch had to be, no neighbors measuring grass height like they were NASA engineers. It was home. That changed the moment she arrived, Karen Mitchell from the city, armed with entitlement, a Pinterest board full of cabin photos. Vamot khat khao ki la mun lapra HOA, amot huvuk konghe ka HOA. She bought the 5-acre parcel right next to mine and immediately started talking about community standards, structure guidelines, and neighborhood covenants. Out here, the only covenant we had was mind your own business and don't bother the person holding the chainsaw. But Karen was different. She wasn't just excited about her rural lifestyle, she was performing it. She live-streamed unpacking boxes. She posted videos titled "City Girl Goes Country." She uploaded drone shots of her land with inspirational quotes about peace, freedom, fresh air, and then spent every weekend screaming at contractors for not installing her decorative shutters, Pinterest level, perfect. She wore expensive yoga outfits and pointed at things like she was inspecting troops, and every time she passed by my driveway, she made sure to slow down and glare, as if my existence was ruining her aesthetic. The truth is, I didn't have anything against her at first. New neighbors come and go. Maybe she'd calm down after settling in. Maybe she'd realize HOA talk wouldn't fly out here. Maybe she'd just plant her lavender and leave me alone. But Karen had that energy, what I call HOA energy. The kind of person who believes rules exist for others but not for her. The kind of person who thinks she automatically outranks you because she once watched a YouTube video on property rights, and when construction on her dream house began, that energy turned into a full-blown storm. The first week, I saw trucks coming in, cement mixers, bulldozers, survey crews, guys with clipboards, guys shouting into radios. It was a massive project, much bigger than anything this area usually sees. They cleared a huge section of her land, dug deep into the soil, and laid rebar like they were building a fortress. I kept to myself, watched from a distance, and figured as long as they stayed on their land, they could build a castle for all I cared. But after a couple weeks, something started nagging at me. Every time I walked by my property line, right where the old iron stake sat undisturbed since the 82nds, I noticed their foundation creeping closer. Too close? I'm not a surveyor, but I know my lines. My dad drilled it into me as a kid. That stake hadn't moved an inch in decades, yet their wall was moving toward it day by day. Still, I tried not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it just looked like it from my angle. Maybe they'd adjust the layout. Maybe they weren't as reckless as they seemed. One morning, curiosity got the better of me. I walked over to check the stake again. Same spot, same depth, same angle. The contractors were pouring concrete, smoothing it out, and that's when my stomach dropped. Their foundation wasn't just close, it was over. I'm talking 6 full inches of concrete, rebar, and structural weight sitting on my land, as clearly as if they'd drawn a line and said, "This spot belongs to us now." I stood there for a moment, stunned. I'm not an emotional guy, but there's something deeply uncomfortable about someone building onto what your father worked for, what you worked for, what you've taken care of for decades. It felt like someone scribbled their name on a family heirloom. I waved down one of the workers and asked where Karen was. They told me she'd be arriving soon, and judging from how the workers kept glancing at her arriving SUV like it was a tornado siren, she wasn't the easiest boss. Sure enough, she pulled up in her crossover BMW, stepped out, and adjusted her designer sunglasses like she was about to judge a fashion runway. When she saw me, her eyebrows raised, surprised, annoyed, maybe even offended that I dared step foot near her construction site. I explained politely, very politely, that the foundation was over my boundary line and asked if she could come take a look. She didn't even walk over. Instead, she pulled out her phone, opened a cheap GPS property app, and held it up like it was undeniable evidence. "This app says the line is there," she said, pointing vaguely at the ground. "So, everything's fine?" I had to bite my tongue not to laugh. "Karen," I said, "those apps are off by 10 to 15 feet. They're not survey grade," she smirked. "Well, your little iron stake thing looks old. Maybe it moved. It's set in concrete," I replied. "It hasn't moved in 40 years. She rolled her eyes like I was wasting her valuable influencer time. "Sir, it's just 6 inches. It's barely measurable. It's not a big deal." It was a big deal, but what mattered more was her attitude, dismissive, arrogant, condescending. She didn't care about boundaries, laws, or property rights. She cared about convenience. And, in her mind, 6 inches wasn't enough to slow down her dream house project. I tried one more time to reason with her. I told her we needed to halt construction until a certified surveyor could recheck the lines. She waved her hand dismissively and said something that still irritates me today. "Don't worry. If something is off, we'll just deal with it later. Deal with it later." That was her whole plan. Just keep building, make it permanent, force me into a corner. At that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just annoyed anymore. I wasn't frustrated. I was determined. Because if Karen wanted to deal with it later, then later was going to hit her like a freight train. And it all started with those 6 stolen inches. The morning after Karen dismissed me with that ridiculous GPS app, I decided I needed to approach the situation calmly, clearly, and with evidence no one in their right mind could ignore. I spent the better part of the night digging through my old storage boxes, flipping through dusty envelopes containing the original survey documents my father kept. The paper had yellowed around the edges, but the lines, the markers, and the coordinates were as sharp as the day they were drawn. I even had the updated survey from when I refinanced about 15 years ago. The markers were exactly the same. No shift, no dispute, no ambiguity. I printed fresh copies of both surveys, slipped them into a binder, and headed toward Karen's construction zone. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted clarity. If she saw the documents, she'd have no choice but to slow down. That's what I kept telling myself. When I walked up, the crew was already hard at work. The concrete from the day before had hardened into a permanent form. Cold, gray, heavy. You don't just scoop that back up and try again. This was the foundation, the spine of her entire dream house. And 6 inches of it was sitting right on my land. Like an uninvited guest who'd already unpacked their bags, I spotted Karen arguing with one of the contractors, waving her arms like a choir conductor, having a meltdown. When she finally saw me, she inhaled sharply like I was the cause of her latest crisis. "Oh, it's you again," she said flatly. "What now?" I forced myself to ignore her tone. "Karen, I brought the official surveys, both from the original and the updated one." Before I could even hand her the binder, she held up a finger like she was silencing a child. "You know," she said, "you're starting to look a little obsessed with this boundary thing, because it matters." I replied, "Look, this isn't just a small detail. A house foundation is a permanent structure. If you're on my property—" She cut me off with a laugh that somehow managed to be both dismissive and arrogant. "It's 6 inches. 6. You could lose 6 inches of dirt in a rainstorm. Who cares?" That was when I knew reasoning wouldn't work. Not because she didn't understand, because she didn't want to. She wasn't looking for truth. She was looking for convenience. Her convenience? I insisted she at least look at the documents. She finally grabbed them, flipped through the pages like she was scanning a grocery flyer, and handed them back without even pausing at the measurements. Outdated, she declared. They're certified, she shrugged. Well, we've made too much progress to stop now. And then she said it, the sentence that made my blood boil more than anything she had said before. Why don't we just shift the property line a little, make it official? I'll handle the paperwork. I'll even pay for the amendment. You should be grateful your land value will probably go up with a nicer house next to it. Shift the property line? I repeated, stunned. Karen, that's not how this works. Oh, please, she snapped. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I'm offering a solution. You're offering to redefine my land because you built your house in the wrong place. We built it where it made sense, she said, and I'm not tearing anything down for 6 inches of dirt. Be reasonable. Reasonable? I'd been nothing but reasonable. Still, I tried one more time. Karen, this isn't going away. You need to fix it before construction goes any further. Her face hardened, and she crossed her arms like she was preparing for battle. I'm not stopping. End of discussion. If you keep interfering, I'll file a complaint with the HOA about harassment. I blinked slowly, trying to decide whether to laugh or lose my temper. Karen, there is no HOA. There is, she insisted. We formed it last month. I'm the provisional president. I stared at her. You can't form an HOA in an area that isn't zoned for an HOA. She smiled, the kind of smile someone gives when they think they've got you trapped. We can if the majority agrees. There are only 2 properties here, I pointed out. Yes, she said sweetly. And we voted, unanimously. You and your husband don't count as a majority against me. Well, that's your interpretation. My fists clenched involuntarily. Not because of anger, but because of the realization that she truly believed she could bend reality to her will. She motioned toward the foundation. Look, we're not tearing it out. I've already scheduled the framing. So unless you want to donate 6 inches of land to the HOA for community improvement, I suggest you let this go. Community improvement, I repeated. Yes, your contribution will be noted. I laughed, because the alternative was losing my mind right then and there. Karen, this isn't a negotiation. Move the foundation, or tear it out and start again. I know. Her expression darkened like a storm cloud blotting out the sun. You're being aggressive. No, I said calmly. I'm being clear. This is harassment, she insisted. This is property law. She stepped closer, lifting her chin in that haughty way of hers. Let me spell this out. My husband and I are building a dream home. We're investing a lot of money into this community. You're not going to ruin that over a few inches. And if you think this is going to stop us, you're mistaken. I looked straight at her. Karen, if you keep building on my property, you're not just mistaken, you're breaking the law. She smirked, a victory smirk, as if she had some ace up her sleeve. Then sue me. Those 3 words hung in the air like a dare, a challenge, an insult. Then she turned around, called out to the contractor, and said loudly enough for me and everyone within 50 feet to hear, "Keep going. Don't listen to him. He can complain all he wants." I stood there for a moment, unable to move, because sometimes, the moment you truly understand someone's arrogance, it steals the breath right out of your lungs. She wasn't going to stop. She wasn't going to listen. She wasn't going to respect my land. She was going to push until I broke. But she didn't know something important, something my father drilled into me during long summers, clearing brush and repairing boundary markers. You don't ever let someone take what's yours. Not an acre, not a foot, not an inch, and definitely not 6 inches. As I walked back to my house, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Not yell, not argue, not negotiate. That was a waste of breath. I needed to document everything. I needed to prepare. I needed to make sure that when the time came, when she eventually discovered that arrogance has a price, I'd have every piece of evidence ready. This wasn't going to be a conversation anymore. This was going to be a process, a legal one, and Karen had no idea that the moment she said, "Then sue me," she signed the first page of the most expensive invoice of her life. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was anxious, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying the look on Karen's face, the smug confidence of someone who had convinced herself she was untouchable. That kind of arrogance doesn't come from ignorance. It comes from believing that other people don't have the spine to stand up to you. Well, she picked the wrong neighbor to test. By sunrise, I had a plan, and like every good plan, it started with preparation. I pulled out my old camcorder, charged the batteries, and set up my phone to automatically back up videos to the cloud. I walked the entire property line and recorded every angle of the encroachment. I filmed the stake, the foundation, the measurements, everything. If Karen wanted to turn this into a battle, she'd be fighting someone who came armed with evidence, not entitlement. Around mid-morning, when the construction noise finally kicked in, I headed back to her lot, binder of documents in one hand, camera in the other. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to raise my voice. My goal was simple: give her one last chance to do the right thing before things escalated. When she saw me approaching, she didn't even pretend to be polite. "Oh my God," she groaned. "What is it now?" I held up the binder. "This is the last time I'm asking politely. Stop construction. Your foundation is on my property, and you're about to make this much worse for yourself." She didn't even glance at the binder. Instead, she snapped her fingers dramatically and motioned toward two men in polo shirts holding clipboards, people I hadn't seen before. "These," she said proudly, "are the HOA Architectural Committee." I looked at them, they looked back at me, and I could tell from their expressions they had no idea what they'd just been recruited into. "Karen," I said slowly, "there is no architectural committee, there is no HOA, you made this up." One of the men cleared his throat awkwardly. "Actually, ma'am, we just moved in last week. She told us serving on the committee was required." I nearly laughed. It would have been hilarious if it wasn't so infuriating. Karen stepped between us. "This is official HOA business. You can't interfere." I walked past her and pointed directly at the concrete. "You're trespassing on my land, HOA or not. That doesn't change the law." She folded her arms. "Well, the HOA has decided that this is acceptable." I stared at her, stunned. "You don't get to decide that. We can," she said confidently, "because we voted. You and your husband, and the committee," she added, jerking her head toward the two bewildered newcomers. The taller one raised a hand timidly. We didn't vote. Karen shot him a glare so sharp it could have cut metal. He immediately lowered his hand. I took a slow breath. "Karen, I am giving you one final warning. Move the foundation while you still can." She smirked again, the same expression she wore the first day. I confronted her. "No." That was it. No hesitation, no confusion, no misunderstanding, just a hard, deliberate no. Then, right in front of me, she spun around to her workers and yelled, "Speed it up, we're behind schedule because of him." A couple of the workers exchanged nervous glances, but they followed orders. The sound of drills, hammers, and machinery drowned out the last shred of patience I had left. If it was war she wanted, it was war she'd get. I walked back to my land, pulled out my phone, and called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a property attorney whose reputation was so sharp he could cut steel with his paperwork. When I explained the situation, he didn't hesitate. "This is a textbook encroachment case," he said, "and if she's continuing after being warned, that's willful negligence. Document everything. I'll handle the rest." So I did. For the next several days, I filmed every inch of progress on her illegal foundation. I took time-stamped photos. I kept a detailed log of conversations. I even recorded a video of me reading the survey out loud next to the boundary marker to remove any doubt about the location. The more evidence I collected, the more reckless Karen became. One afternoon, she marched right up to the property line, and I mean right up to it, and drove a stake into the ground on my side. She hammered it in with wild, exaggerated swings, and then stepped back, admiring her work. "There," she said triumphantly, "new boundary marker." I filmed the whole thing. "Karen," I said, "you can't just put a stick in the ground and call it the new line." She shrugged. The HOA approved it. Every time she said the HOA, I felt a new pulse of irritation. The HOA didn't exist. None of her rules existed. She was creating an imaginary government and expecting everyone to obey it. The next day, she escalated even further. She put up a giant wooden sign right on the edge of my land that read, "HOA Expansion Zone, Authorized Construction Area." I stood there staring at it, jaw hanging open. It was so absurd it felt like a prank. But Karen wasn't joking. Her face shone with pride as she admired her handiwork. "It gives the construction a more official appearance," she explained. "People respond better to authority. They respond better to legality," I countered. She waved a hand. "Same thing." It was at that moment I realized the problem might go deeper than entitlement. Karen had convinced herself she was the law, And anyone who opposed her wasn't just wrong, they were an inconvenience that needed to be dealt with. That's when I delivered the final verbal warning. "Karen," I said calmly, "I'm taking this to court." She crossed her arms defiantly. "Go ahead." HOA lawyers are very powerful. "You mean the lawyer you found on Google who specializes in drafting newsletter templates?" Her expression flickered. Just for a second, she wasn't used to anyone challenging her, especially not someone who came armed with facts instead of feelings. "You're going to lose," she said eventually. Her voice was quieter, but her ego was still doing the talking. "And when you do, the HOA will fine you for obstruction." "I don't belong to your HOA," I reminded her. She smiled a cold smile. "You will, or you'll regret it." That was it, the final straw. Not the illegal construction, not the fake HOA, not the ridiculous boundary signs, it was the threat. I walked away without another word. Back at my house, I sent my attorney everything. The videos, the photos, the logs, the timestamps. I wrote a formal cease and desist letter and had him deliver it through official channels. A real law firm, not whatever print-at-home HOA documents Karen kept waving around. Her response arrived 2 days later. It was printed on pink paper, written in an over-the-top official font, and stamped with a gold sticker that looked like it came straight from a craft store. At the top, it read, "HOA Notice of Non-Compliance." Below that, in all caps, "You are interfering with an approved HOA construction project. Cease immediately or face fines." I laughed so hard I nearly fell off my chair. My attorney didn't find it funny. "This actually helps your case," he said. "It shows intent, disregard for property boundaries, and misuse of fabricated authority." And so began the official process. We sent the real cease and desist. Karen ignored it. We sent a second warning, this time with legal consequences listed. Karen posted it on social media with the caption, "Local man attempts to sabotage our dream house. But HOA won't back down." She had no idea she was building a mountain of evidence for me, and she had no idea that each nail hammered into that illegal foundation was another nail in the coffin of her wallet, her reputation, and her imaginary HOA empire. Because I wasn't just preparing to fight her, I was preparing to win. The official legal process started the moment my attorney filed the cease and desist, but the real battle, the psychological one, began long before we stepped foot in a courtroom. Karen didn't just ignore the first letter, she escalated. Hard. It was almost impressive how committed she was to digging her own grave. 2 days after receiving the cease and desist, she hosted what she called an emergency HOA meeting, which was really just her husband, and the 2 poor new neighbors she'd trapped into being on her committee. She held the meeting on her half-constructed porch, standing proudly on top of the illegal 6-inch extension like a dictator surveying her empire. From my property, I could hear every word she said. Karen didn't talk, she performed, loudly, aggressively, the kind of voice that carried through the trees, whether you wanted it to or not. "We cannot allow this man," she declared, pointing dramatically in the direction of my land, "to sabotage our community development. This behavior is hostile, it is disruptive, and frankly, it is unneighborly." Her husband nodded like a bobblehead. One of the other neighbors timidly raised a hand. "But isn't his land, like, his land?" Karen glared. "That's not the point. The HOA approved the construction." "But he's not in the HOA," the other neighbor said. Karen's nostrils flared. "He will be. We're expanding the boundaries. It's for the good of the neighborhood." "What neighborhood?" I muttered under my breath. There were 3 homes within a mile, theirs, mine, and 1 cabin belonging to a retired school teacher who stayed away from drama like it was a contagious disease, Karen continued. "Besides, he's overreacting. The encroachment is barely noticeable, a few inches maybe, and those survey stakes are outdated." She said maybe, like the word offended her. Another neighbor tried again. "But what if he, sues?" Her husband puffed out his chest. "Let him." HOA lawyers love this stuff. I couldn't help but chuckle. HOA lawyers. Karen didn't even have an HOA lawyer. She had a guy whose website looked like it was designed in 2002, offering services like drafting covenants and helping HOAs start their community communications journey. The guy probably spent more time designing newsletters than stepping foot in a courtroom. Still, the moment Karen dismissed the cease and desist, my attorney filed the next step, a formal notice of encroachment and demand for immediate remediation. In plain English, it meant, stop building, fix the violation, or get ready for court. Instead of stopping, Karen doubled down. I found out when I heard the roar of a cement truck rumbling up her driveway at 7 in the morning. I walked over, camera in hand, and sure enough, they were pouring additional slabs, extending the illegal portion even further. She was trying to make it so permanent, so expensive, that I'd be forced to accept it because you can't tear down a finished home. Oh, but you can, and the law is very clear about it. When Karen spotted me filming, she strutted over like she was about to issue a royal decree. "You're not allowed to record HOA property," she snapped. "This is my property," I reminded her. She raised her chin. Not for long. I couldn't believe I was hearing this. "Karen, you understand you're making the situation worse for yourself, right? I'm protecting my investment," she said proudly, "by illegally building on my land. It's only illegal if I lose," she replied. For the first time, I realized she truly believed that. She believed she could bully, talk over, or intimidate reality itself. She believed the person who shouted the loudest won the argument. She believed the HOA, her imaginary HOA, gave her power. I didn't respond. I just recorded everything and walked away. That afternoon, my attorney called. "She responded to our notice," he said, sounding tired. "And, do you want the funny part or the infuriating part first?" "Both." He sighed. "Her lawyer wrote that the encroachment is minor and purely cosmetic, that it does not impede the use of your property, and that forcing them to alter construction would be unconscionable." I rubbed my forehead. "Anything else?" "Oh yes, they offered you a settlement." I perked up. "How much?" $5,000. I laughed so hard I choked. $5,000 for a mandatory easement on my land? Exactly. And the letter heavily implies that if you refuse, they'll claim you're acting in bad faith. Bad faith, I repeated. I warned them a dozen times. My attorney's tone sharpened. "This is good for us, really good." They just put in writing that they knowingly proceeded after multiple warnings. He was right. Every arrogant sentence in that letter was another nail in their legal coffin. The next morning, we filed the lawsuit. Within 48 hours, everything changed. A sheriff's deputy arrived at my home to serve them the notice. I wasn't there, but he later told me Karen tried to refuse it, yelling, "You can't do this, I'm the HOA president," like that was supposed to shield her from the law. Then she tried to claim her house was community property, and he couldn't step on it. When he ignored her, she shouted, "I pay your salary," which is pretty much the fastest way to get on any deputy's bad side. Word spread through the rural community fast. People around here don't get a lot of excitement, so a full-blown HOA-style war unfolding at the edge of town was the biggest entertainment since the county fair runaway goat incident. Strangers approached me at the gas station to ask, "You the guy suing the lady with the fake HOA?" Or, "Is it true she built her house on your land?" Or, my favorite, "Heard she tried to ticket someone for having mismatched garden gnomes?" The public sympathy was definitely on my side. But sympathy doesn't win court cases. Evidence does, and I had mountains of it. Karen, meanwhile, kept escalating. She started posting videos online, accusing me of harassment. She wrote long HOA newsletters, printed herself warning residents about anti-HOA agitators. Residents, there were 3 of us. Then she put up another sign, this one bigger and bolder, HOA property. Trespassers will be fined. I filmed that too. One evening, I saw her pacing around her half-built porch, ranting to her husband about how this whole town is backwards and how she was bringing order to chaos. At one point, she said, "Once we win the lawsuit, he'll be forced to join the HOA." Her husband nodded dutifully, though he looked like a man slowly realizing he had married a storm in yoga pants. A week later, her lawyer sent another letter. This time, it said that I should consider the community impact of your actions and work cooperatively with HOA leadership to resolve the dispute peacefully. He even suggested I attend an HOA meeting to express my concerns in an organized and respectful environment. I forwarded it to my attorney. His reply, "We're going to bury them." And we did. We gathered everything: videos, photos, audio, timestamps, construction permits, county records. We compiled emails and texts. We documented the fake HOA demands. We prepared an airtight argument with legal precedents thicker than Karen's binder of imaginary rules. Meanwhile, Karen continued acting like nothing could touch her. She upgraded the sign at the property line, painting it pink and adding glittered letters, HOA territory, authorized personnel, only. She posted Instagram stories bragging about standing strong against unlawful bullies. She invited friends from the city to tour the future model home of this community. She even tried to find me fines for excessive tree clutter visible from HOA spaces. My attorney nearly cried from how valuable that document was. Then, exactly 8 months from the day she poured the illegal foundation, the court date arrived. Karen strutted into the courtroom wearing a bright power blazer and carrying a color-coded binder labeled HOA case file. She walked like she thought she owned the place, like the judge was going to pat her on the back for showing initiative. She had no idea what was coming. There's a funny thing about courtrooms. No matter how confident you are outside those doors, no matter how many people you've bullied, bragged to, or manipulated, the moment you walk in, all that noise evaporates. It becomes just you, the judge, and the truth. And truth doesn't care how many HOA newsletters you've printed. I arrived early, dressed in a clean button-down and jeans, nothing fancy, just respectful. My attorney sat beside me, flipping through a stack of folders thicker than a college textbook. When Karen walked in, every head in the courtroom turned. She wore a bright pink blazer that practically glowed under the fluorescent lights. Paired with sunglasses perched on her head like she was making a celebrity cameo, she carried her massive HOA binder hugged to her chest like it was a holy artifact. Her husband trailed behind her like a defeated golden retriever. The first thing she did was walk straight up to the bailiff and complain about the temperature in the room, loudly. "It's freezing in here. This is not an appropriate environment for legal proceedings." The bailiff just stared at her until she walked away. Then she spotted me. And oh, the look she gave me, pure, undiluted contempt. She marched toward my table, heels clacking, and leaned in like she was about to deliver some world-shattering confession. "You're going to lose," she whispered. "HOA lawyers are built for this." Her lawyer had just walked in behind her, carrying nothing but a slim laptop bag. The contrast between my attorney, who looked like he was ready to bring down a Fortune 500 company, and Karen's lawyer, who looked like he specialized in drafting welcome packets for gated communities, was comical. My attorney leaned over to me and whispered, "If this guy tries to quote HOA bylaws in a property line case, I'm buying you dinner." The judge finally entered. A sharp-eyed woman with an expression that said she had absolutely no time for nonsense. Everyone rose. Karen stood with perfect posture, like she expected applause. "Be seated," the judge said. Karen sat down with the air of a queen, reclaiming her throne. My attorney began by presenting the exhibits, survey documents, photographs, timestamps, video recordings of me warning Karen, audio clips of Karen saying, "Just shift the property line, sue me, and it's only illegal if I lose." The judge's eyebrows rose several times during the presentation. Karen's lawyer shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Then came the moment I knew would hit hard. The video of Karen hammering her own fake boundary marker into my land while declaring the old stake invalid. The courtroom actually chuckled. Even the judge couldn't hide the slightest twitch of amusement. My attorney finished with a clear timeline. Warnings issued, surveys provided, cease and desist ignored, further construction knowingly completed on my property. He ended by saying, "This was not a mistake, not an oversight, not an accident. This was a deliberate and ongoing encroachment." Then it was Karen's turn. Her lawyer stood up first, clearing his throat nervously. "Your Honor, we believe this entire case is an overreaction. The encroachment is extremely minimal, 6 inches. My clients made every reasonable effort to collaborate with the neighbor, who refused all attempts at compromise." "Compromise," the judge repeated. "Yes," he said quickly. "My clients offered financial compensation, easement terms, adjustments to improve community relations." The judge held up a hand. "I've seen the easement offer. It was $5,000. Karen's lawyer hesitated. "Yes, Your Honor, a generous." "Generous?" The judge's tone could have frozen boiling water. Karen suddenly stood up, unable to let someone else do the talking. "Your Honor, if I may, the HOA approved the construction. We followed all community regulations, and, quite frankly, he's being dramatic. 6 inches is nothing. My contractors confirmed the GPS app was accurate." The judge cut her off. "Sit down." Karen opened her mouth to argue. "Sit down." She sat. The judge turned to her lawyer. "Continue, please." "Without your client assisting?" Karen crossed her arms like a scolded teenager. Her lawyer stammered through the rest of his arguments, most of which revolved around phrases like negotiation attempts and reasonable allowances. He even tried to introduce HOA bylaws into evidence, but the judge shut that down immediately. "This is not an HOA case," she said firmly. "This is a property rights case." Karen slumped back, stunned. Then the judge opened the floor for questions. She looked at Karen. "Mrs. Mitchell, did the neighbor tell you the foundation was over the property line?" Karen lifted her chin. "He expressed concerns, yes. And did you investigate those concerns?" "I consulted a GPS app." The judge's expression darkened. "A phone application." "Yes, Your Honor, it is very reliable." Silence. "Mrs. Mitchell," the judge said, her voice dangerously calm. "Did you review the certified surveys he provided? They were outdated. How did you determine that?" "Because they looked old." My attorney closed his eyes slowly, savoring the gift. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Mitchell, did you continue construction after being told you were encroaching on his property?" Karen smiled. "We had already invested too much to stop. So your answer is yes. It's not that simple. Yes or no?" Karen hesitated. "Yes." "And did you or did you not install new boundary markers on property that was not yours?" Karen's smile wavered. "They were for the HOA." The judge slammed her pen on the desk. "This case has nothing to do with the HOA. It has to do with your deliberate disregard for legal boundary lines." Karen's husband sank lower and lower in his seat until he looked like a melting candle. The judge continued. "Mrs. Mitchell, did you tell the plaintiff?" "It's only illegal if I lose." Karen tried to laugh it off. "I was joking." "No," the judge said. "You were not." The courtroom fell silent. Then came the ruling. "I find that the encroachment was not accidental. The defendants were informed multiple times, provided with surveys, and given warnings to halt construction. They chose to ignore all warnings. This is willful negligence." Karen gasped like someone had punched her. "The land in question is essential to the structural footprint of the home. Therefore, it must be valued at the highest possible rate for compensation." My attorney smiled. The judge continued. "The defendants will pay the appraised value of the encroached land, $75,000. Karen looked relieved for a moment. Plus the plaintiff's legal fees, $18,000. Relief began to fade, plus the cost of a new certified survey, fade faster, plus the cost of easement documentation and recording fees. Karen's relief shattered completely. Total financial penalty, the judge concluded, just over $100,000. Karen shot to her feet. "This is outrageous. You can't do this. I'm the HOA president." The judge didn't even look at her. "Court is adjourned." Karen's lawyer tried to calm her, but she exploded, yelling about appeals, community standards, discrimination against HOA leadership, and a conspiracy against strong women in rural spaces. Meanwhile, her husband stared at the floor like he was silently questioning every decision that led him to this moment. As for me, I shook my attorney's hand, thanked him, and walked out of the courtroom feeling lighter than I had in months. Justice had been served, even if it came with a side of theatrical meltdown. But Karen had only begun to pay. Because court fees were one thing. What came after? That was going to cost her far, far more. In the days following the court ruling, I expected things to finally calm down. After all, Karen had just been slapped with over $100,000 in penalties, more than enough to make a normal person step back, breathe, and reevaluate their life choices. But Karen wasn't a normal person. She wasn't built for humility or reflection. She was built for escalation, and when she lost in court, it didn't humble her. It cracked something open inside her. At first, it was quiet, suspiciously quiet. No HOA letters taped to my gate, no glitter-covered signs about community standards, no passive-aggressive comments when I walked to my mailbox. Even her construction crew vanished for a few days, leaving the house sitting awkwardly between half-finished landscaping and a driveway covered in construction dust. Part of me hoped she'd finally accepted reality, that the law had spoken, the evidence was undeniable, and the smartest thing she could do now was take the loss gracefully. But Karen wasn't wired for smart. She was wired for spectacular self-destruction. The silence was just the calm before the storm. One morning, as I was fixing a fence post near the creek, I heard the unmistakable sound of her BMW roaring down her gravel driveway. The engine revved in that angry, sputtering way that only happens when someone is using horsepower to vent their emotions. The car skidded to a stop in front of her house, and Karen stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses and a stiff blazer. Even though it was nearly 90 degrees out, she stormed into her freshly built home, slamming the door behind her hard enough that the window panes rattled. Her husband followed a few paces behind, shoulders slumped, carrying what looked like a stack of unopened bills. A few hours later, the shouting started. It wasn't the normal irritated tone she used with contractors or neighbors. This was different, raw panic, anger, and fear blending together. The words carried through the trees. "We can't afford this. You said the HOA would handle it. We can't sell it, it's on an easement." I paused mid-hammer, letting the weight of it sink in. For the first time since she arrived, Karen was confronting the consequences she'd spent months ignoring. She'd built her mansion of entitlement right into the side of a cliff. She just didn't notice it until she'd leapt off. That evening, her husband approached me quietly at the edge of our property line. I expected hostility, maybe demands. Instead, he stood there, wringing his hands, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "I'm sorry," he said softly. I stared at him. For what? For everything. She listens to no one. Not me, not the judge, not even her own lawyer. He sighed. She already fired him. By the way, I wasn't surprised. He looked around at the newly built house, modern, huge, and gleaming under the setting sun. It should have been their dream come true. Instead, it was a monument to Karen's pride. "We thought moving here would be a fresh start," he said. "A new life. But she needs to be in charge of something. Anything. She needs control. That doesn't excuse what she did," I replied. "I know." His voice cracked a little. "But I want you to know I tried." Then he walked back to his house with slow, defeated steps. I didn't see him again for several days. The very next morning, Karen's counterattack began. She printed a brand new HOA newsletter, 8 pages long, printed on neon pink paper and stuffed into the mailboxes of every resident within a 2-mile radius. The headline read, "Local man destroying community harmony action required." The letter painted me as a hostile anti-HOA extremist, accused me of attacking community growth, and even claimed I had verbally assaulted her. The entire thing was a bizarre mixture of lies, exaggerations, and accusations written like a soap opera script. The problem for Karen was simple. Everyone knew she was lying. I'd lived here for decades. She'd lived here for 6 months. I helped people repair fences, pull cars from mud, and clear storm debris. Karen complained about the color of someone's mailbox. The community didn't rally behind her. They laughed. Some people even mailed her the newsletter back with sarcastic notes scribbled on them. "Didn't read, no HOA here, please stop, seek help." One neighbor returned the newsletter, stuffed inside a bag of glitter, an obvious reference to Karen's obsession with sparkly HOA signs. I heard Karen shrieking about that for 15 straight minutes. But the real blow came when she tried to put her house on the market, and the market rejected her, hard. You see, potential buyers do something Karen never did. They read documents, they checked county maps, they looked up encroachment history, and the moment they discovered the house sat partially on a permanent easement, requiring annual fees, if not purchased outright, they ran for the hills. No one wanted a legal mess, no one wanted a property tied to an HOA war, and absolutely no one wanted to buy a house built by a woman who thought she could outsmart property law using glitter and determination. Weeks passed. Karen's social media presence went from daily country lifestyle posts to long rants about corrupt judges and ungrateful neighbors, then to silence. The sparkle outfits disappeared, the HOA newsletter stopped, even her BMW looked like it had given up on life, sitting dusty in the driveway. Then, one evening, a U-Haul truck arrived. Karen and her husband loaded up boxes late into the night. There was no ceremony, no farewell, no dramatic speech about the HOA future, just 2 broken people packing their failed dream into cardboard. The next morning, they drove off. No goodbye, no closure, no glitter. For the first time in months, peace returned. But the story didn't end there. A few weeks later, the new owner of Karen's former home, a young couple from out of state, knocked on my door. They were polite, nervous, and clearly embarrassed about something. "We found some documents in the house," the woman said. "About the HOA." I almost choked. There is no HOA, that's what we thought. The man replied, handing me a folder. But there's also paperwork about the easement. We want to resolve it properly, cleanly. He paused, then asked the question no one had asked me before. What can we do to make this right, fully right? It was the first sincere request I'd heard since this nightmare began. We talked for hours. They weren't entitled, they weren't dramatic, they weren't trying to shift blame or bully me with pink signs. They were grateful for clarity, grateful for honesty, and determined to avoid Karen's mistakes. In the end, they bought out the easement entirely, paid fair value without negotiations or theatrics, and with that money, I built a small cabin at the back of my land, a peaceful retreat overlooking the creek, a reminder not of the fight, not of the stress, not of Karen, but of what happens when someone finally respects your boundaries. Karen thought her fake HOA could overpower the truth. But the truth, it doesn't need glitter, it just needs time. By the time Karen's U-Haul disappeared down the long county road, it felt like someone had finally lifted a 100-pound weight off my shoulders. For the first time in nearly a year, the air felt clean again, quiet again, normal again. No more surprise HOA fines taped to my truck. No more neon signs about community standards. No more arguments about imaginary rules. No more Instagram live streams of Ho Karen takes on rural life. Just peace. But even as the dust settled, a part of me was still on guard. After dealing with someone like Karen, you start to expect the absurd. A part of me half expected her to return with a film crew claiming she was making a documentary about small-town corruption, or worse, try to resurrect her HOA from afar. But days passed, then weeks, and nothing happened. Instead, what came was something I didn't expect at all. It was a warm Saturday morning when a sleek black SUV pulled into my driveway. I stepped out onto the porch, cautious but curious. A well-dressed man and woman stepped out, late 30s, matching smiles, holding a folder between them like it contained their future. "Hi," the woman said with a gentle wave. "We're the new owners of the house next door." I'd seen lights on in Karen's old place, but I assumed someone was cleaning or staging the property. I hadn't realized it had actually sold. Given its history, I figured the house would sit on the market for months or be bought at auction for pennies. "I'm Emily," she continued. "This is my husband, Jack." We weren't sure how to introduce ourselves, considering everything. I couldn't help but laugh. "Trust me. Anything you say will be better than the last introduction I got from that house." They laughed too real. Genuine laughter. The kind I hadn't heard since before Karen's reign of absurdity. Jack lifted the folder. We found some paperwork in a locked drawer. About the easement and the HOA, or, attempted HOA. Attempted is the right word, I said. Emily stepped forward, her tone shifting from friendly to sincere. "We want to do things properly this time. We know the situation was complicated. We want to fix it correctly. All of it." I motioned for them to come inside. I made coffee. We sat at my kitchen table. The morning sun spilling across old wooden boards my father and I sanded down decades ago. And as strange as it sounds, the moment felt peaceful, almost healing. They handed me the documents. Karen had kept everything. Notes from her fake HOA meetings, half-written fines, boundary maps she'd drawn in pink marker, and the legal easement papers the judge had ordered. All of it was a time capsule of delusion. "We'd like to buy out the easement," Jack said plainly. "Clean slate, no loose ends. The annual payment is manageable," Emily added. "But we want our home to be free of all that, and we want you to never have to deal with anything left behind." It was the first time in this entire saga that someone had approached me with respect, humility, and common sense. It felt almost foreign. I leaned back. "You two don't owe me anything except the legal minimum. You didn't cause this." "We know," Jack said. "But we want to, because we want to be good neighbors." Those words, good neighbors, hit me harder than I expected. When you live on rural land, neighbors aren't just people who live next door. They're your emergency contacts when a tree falls at midnight. They're the ones who help pull your truck out when you misjudge a muddy patch. They're the folks who wave every morning, whether they know your name or not. You protect each other out here. Karen never understood that. But these two, they got it. We negotiated a fair price, far less punishing than what the court had forced Karen to pay, far more reasonable for people who hadn't done a thing wrong. They insisted on paying in full, and within a week, the paperwork was filed. Clean, simple, no drama. With the money, I finally built something I'd been dreaming about for years, but never justified spending on, a small pinewood cabin overlooking the creek. Nothing extravagant, just a 2-room hideaway with a tin roof and a stone fire pit. A place to drink coffee at sunrise, watch deer wander through the trees, and breathe without the weight of conflict. Funny how something born out of chaos could turn into something so peaceful. A month later, Jack and Emily invited me over to see the renovations they'd done. Gone were Karen's glitter signs, pastel-colored bulletin boards, and white picket HOA border fences. The house looked warmer, simpler, lived in. They'd replaced Karen's big, bold HOA President Karen Mitchell office plaque with a framed painting of the creek. They even joked about converting her old HOA meeting room into a yoga space. As we walked the property line together, Emily stopped at the old boundary stake, the real one, the one buried deep in concrete since 1985. "This thing caused so much trouble," she said softly. "No," I said. "Karen caused the trouble. This just revealed it." She nodded thoughtfully. "People create their own disasters sometimes, or try to drag everyone else into them," I added, and then came the twist the moment I didn't expect. Jack turned to me and asked, "Did she ever apologize? Even once?" I said no. He nodded. "We figured." Then he pulled something from his pocket, Karen's old HOA president badge, a cheap gold pin with tacky lettering. They'd found it wedged behind a bathroom cabinet. "I think this belongs to you," he said, smiling. I stared at it for a moment, then burst out laughing, a deep, cathartic laugh I didn't know had been stuck inside me all year. I set the pin on a stump near the wooded edge of my land. "Let nature have it," I said. "It'll disappear eventually." Just like Karen, Jack and Emily stayed for hours, swapping stories about the move, their plans for the house, and their surprise at the whole HOA fiasco. When they finally headed home, I sat on my porch and watched the sun dip behind the trees. For the first time in a long time, the land felt completely mine again. But it wasn't victory I felt. It was relief. Some boundaries are physical fences, stakes, maps. But some boundaries are emotional respect, honesty, humility. Karen crossed all of them without hesitation, and she paid for every inch. Life has a way of balancing the scales eventually, even when the path there is messy, loud, and full of glitter-covered HOA signs nailed to the wrong side of the property line. Sometimes, the only way to restore peace is to stand firm when someone tries to take it from you. When everything was finally over, I realized something important. Boundaries only matter if you defend them. Karen didn't lose because of 6 inches of concrete. She lost because she believed rules were optional, that other people's rights were negotiable, and that her ego was more important than the truth. Life doesn't work that way. Respect matters, accountability matters, and humility matters most of all. You can't build anything, houses, relationships, communities, on top of someone else's space and expect it to stand forever. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Protect what's yours, but do it the right way. Stand firm, stay calm, gather your evidence, and let the truth do the heavy lifting. Sooner or later, it always does. Before you go, tell me in the comments, what would you have done if someone built their house onto your land? And hey, if you enjoy wild HOA drama like this, don't forget to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are on the way.